But last night on Sky News, John Howard appeared with Sharri Markson, and tell you what, it was fascinating to get the viewpoints of the former Prime Minister in his 86th year, and it was a real breath of fresh air to see what a genuine, old-school Conservative politician would see, and what the rest of us are scratching our heads wondering why the rest of the world, particularly in Canberra, can't see it the way John Howard did. So we'll start today by having a look back at what he said. Let's take this first clip right now on Howard talking about immigration.
There's an instinctive feeling in the Australian community that some of our problems with housing, with transport, congestion in the cities is due to the fact that we have got too big an intake. Now, I think we need to have a steady, adjustable, if you can have both those things at the same time. I suppose it can be steady if the adjustments are not too sharp. But you've got to have a steady immigration program, but it's got to be tailored to the needs of the community. And it can't overload cities.
Do you think it's done that? Is that what we're seeing?
Well, I think there's some evidence. I mean, there's a lot of debate about this, but I think it's overloaded, the cities, and certainly it's an issue with housing.
Now let's cut to part of the interview where climate change and net zero took place. Also interesting to get his take on what he sees himself as a climate change agnostic.
If there's a difference of opinion on net zero, let us resolve it quickly.
Do you have a view on what it should be?
Oh, I've become a climate change agnostic. And I don't normally use that word except in a religious context, and I'm certainly not an agnostic religiously, but I am on climate change very agnostic. And I think the world is making a mistake by sort of going overboard about climate change, but that is a very big, broad issue.
When you say agnostic in the sense of climate change, what do you mean by that? Just final question.
No, what I mean by that is that I'm not persuaded that the world will come to an end if we don't reduce carbon emissions in a radical way.
Yeah. So you abandon net zero, the 2050
Well, that
targets.
means that I'm doubtful that net zero is worth the price we're paying for it. That's my view. But I'm a former. I'm a has-been.
Meanwhile, the subject changed to Victoria. Wondering how is it that the Liberal Party can be so weak? Well, this is John Howard's reaction. He sees it quite differently. And then he gets to talk a little bit about the federal system and what he expects and hopes for the leader there in Susan Lee.
Do you think that Victoria is a lost cause for the Liberal Party, given Jacinta Allen is somehow, according to the polls, on track to win the next election? And this is despite unprecedented crime, endless tax hikes, record debt and the Indigenous Treaty.
I don't think the Liberal Party is a lost cause in Victoria. No, I never think the Liberal Party is a lost cause because it's shown great recuperative powers in the past. Now, if you look at opinion polls, a few months ago, the federal opposition was well ahead of the Labor Party according to the opinion polls. But the Labor Party ended up winning the last election with a better majority than I personally thought they would have. And a lot of people tended to agree with me in that. But I do think the Liberal Party has to focus on the policy divide in that state. It's had too many internal fights. I mean, the debilitating impact of the pseudo-deeming dispute was bad. I mean, look, there are certain fundamentals, and the position that Moira Deeming took on gender issues was right, and I thought John Pizzuto, talented though he was wrong on that. They've got to put that behind them. They've just got to get rid of that and focus. And if they do that, they can win, because it's been a pretty bad government, that Labor administration, but it survived in the past and it will survive again unless the Liberal Party gets its act together. And it gets its act together by focusing on big policy differences, not on talking about itself. The public has got no patience with political parties that spend their time talking about themselves. It all depends on performance. The Liberal Party has a new leadership group, and Susan Lay's got to be given a chance to perform as a leader, and I hope that she succeeds. I want her to succeed. Not only because I'm a Liberal, but because I think she's got a lot of talent and a lot of commitment. But there's got to be a focus on policy differences, and the barnacles, as I used to call them, have got to be got rid of.
So a real take from Howard. He's not out to destroy anyone within his party. More so, he's hoping that those that work for his party that he represented are going to continue to do the work, and provides a real, genuine perspective. Doesn't believe in hopelessness. Well, the subject gets on to the big subject of Israel-Palestine, and John Howard had earlier released, alongside his former Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, their take on what was really going on. Let's cut to that part of the interview now.
I think the Labor Party is having an identity crisis on this issue. This would never have happened under Hawke's leadership. And Albanese talks about how he wanted to model himself on Bob Hawke. Well, he's not doing that when it comes to the Middle East.
But on foreign policy more generally, we see this government aligning itself with the left-leaning leaders of Europe and out of step with Washington.
Well, the left-leaning leaders of Europe, as you call them, have been elected. I mean, Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister of Britain. He's the Labor Prime Minister of Britain. I dealt for 11 years with the Labor Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair. And on international policy, he was great to do with. He made a lot of sense.
More centrist.
Well, it's common sense. I think on this issue, Starmer and Macron, and to some degree, I can't really assess him yet, it's too early, the new Chancellor of Germany, appear to have gone along with the mob that say, well, it's terrible what's happening in Gaza, and the way to finish it is to give in. Now, you can't do that. They started it. I mean...
you can't give in to terrorists.
No, you can't give in to people. You certainly can't give in to terrorists. And Hamas are a terrorist organisation in the eyes of Australia, Britain, America, Canada, New Zealand, any country that you respectably name. They've all condemned it. And there's always a situation where the country that retaliates inflicts a lot more harm on the country that starts the fight. I mean, you've got to remember that when the Japanese hurled themselves at Pearl Harbor, they claimed the lives of 4,500 Americans. The firebombing of Tokyo, even leaving aside the atom bomb, firebombing of Tokyo in 1945, and 2 nights in succession claimed 120,000 Japanese lives. Now, a lot of them would have been women and children, innocent non-combatants. But that is tragic. That's what happens in a warlike situation. And that is why it's so important to keep reminding ourselves that it was Hamas that started the latest conflict. If you are saddened, as I am, by the sight of children suffering in Gaza, and no child deserves that.
And they still hold hostages. They're refusing
well, they
to
still hold hostages, and they took hostages, and for the deliberate reason of terrorising the Israeli population. And I think Israel is a remarkably democratic country. I mean, you get demonstrations every night against the government, and they're big demonstrations. And I can understand the feelings of the families of the hostages. I can also understand and sympathise with the Netanyahu government, because they are carrying the torch against Hamas.
Now, let's have a look at an earlier piece from Sherry Markson, where she puts together the principles laid out as to why Downer and Howard don't support a Palestinian state, particularly on the 4 points that must be worked towards. It's fascinating. Let's take a look at it now.
Now, one of Australia's greatest ever Prime Ministers, John Howard, has called Albanese's decision to recognise a Palestinian state reckless and dangerous. Howard and his long-serving Foreign Minister Alexander Downer issued a rare public statement today saying they're appalled, they use the word appalled, by the Albanese government's recent behaviour. They said both the Prime Minister and the Minister for Home Affairs, Tony Burke, have undermined a relationship of enduring trust between Australia and Israel. In doing so, they have failed to match the leadership and strength once shown by Labor figures such as Bob Hawke and Doc Evatt. Howard and Downer accused Albanese and Burke of breaching international law in prioritising short-term domestic political advantage. They said in their statement, the question of recognising Palestine as a sovereign state is not a matter of empty symbolism. It strikes at the heart of whether international law is to be respected or discarded whenever political expediency is deemed more convenient. And here was Alexander Downer speaking to Chris Kenny about this earlier.
I mean, I've noticed people who are supporting the Palestinians are always going on about international law and the importance of international law. Well, the recognition of a Palestinian state is quite contrary to international law because it doesn't meet any of the four criteria.
And in the statement, they explain the four criteria, what it is that international law requires for statehood to be met. Now, this includes a defined territory, a permanent population, an effective government, and the capacity to engage in relations with other states. They say Palestine, as it stands today, does not meet these standards. There are no agreed borders. Hamas, a terror group, still controls Gaza. There's no unified or effective government, and the Palestinian Authority lacks true control or credibility with Palestinian people. Now, John Howard and Alexander Downer also point out that under the Oslo Accords, the Palestinians did commit to resolve final status issues, including borders, settlements, refugees, security, and statehood, through direct negotiations with Israel. But then that never happened. The former leaders say recognition of a Palestinian state outside this framework discards those commitments. It offers the prize of statehood without requiring the compromises, governance capacity, and accountability that a durable peace demands. And Downer explained earlier on Chris Kenny how this is a prize for Hamas.
We've been outraged that Hamas has been rewarded in this way by the Australian government. It's a shocking thing to do. I mean, your viewers don't need to be reminded of the horrific crimes that Hamas has committed.
Downer and Howard also argue that the move to recognise a Palestinian state sets a dangerous precedent and it entrenches division. They say it teaches the Palestinian leadership that peace is unnecessary for statehood. And then this, I thought, was the strongest part. They conclude their statement by saying, to recognise Palestine prematurely is not just poor diplomacy, it is a betrayal of the legal order that underpins the very idea of a rules-based international system. Those who value international law and who understand the hard lessons of conflict resolution should resist such a reckless and dangerous course. Isn't it refreshing to be reminded of what real leadership, moral clarity, and clear argument looks like?
So there you have John Howard, and of course relying there on Alexander Downer, and many people watching this show will say Downer is bad form. Well, yes, he will potentially have to answer for his involvement in Russiagate, as will others that also quit around about the same time. Julie Bishop walked away. Malcolm Turnbull walked away. There was also separately Andrew Robb, the day after he signed Australia into the TPP. He retired from politics altogether. So there is a lot of bad form in the way that these actors work, but overall we're seeing a very distinct situation that you're going to have to pick a side. Are you pro-Israel? Are you pro-Palestine? Both sides imperfect, but there is a rule and an order to the rules, etc. That is what Howard is placing here. Let's now cross to what we saw yesterday with the protests at Bondi Beach being covered from something that happened on Father's Day. Look at the reaction here, where those that are pro-Israel aren't going to be intimidated by the pro-Palestinian forces that got there, unorganised, unapproved, and were there, as has been argued, to intimidate. But are the pro-Israelis on Bondi Beach going to do so? Have a look.
You can stick your Palestine up your hole. You can stick your Palestine up your hole. You can stick your Palestine. You can stick your Palestine. Yeah. You can stick your Palestine up your hole. Again. Stick your Palestine up your hole.
It's a powerful situation now that we're seeing that the Israelis, or certainly the pro-Jewish people, don't generally retaliate to when they are attacked. So this is an argument now between impatience and whether or not terrorism can be acknowledged. And this is the great divide. This is what Albanese versus John Howard would be arguing over. It's also what Trump has said. He will never reward terrorists. And they can't. And so that they won't. So where are we if the United States wasn't going to acknowledge what the UN is hoping to do by having a resolution to support a Palestinian state? If they can't define their borders, if they can't have an effective government, if they can't have a population, etc., that is contained, if they can't negotiate with other states and don't want to operate in peace, how can you possibly make that country a state? Are you then going to escalate this around the world? It is truly a powerful scenario. Well, in the meantime, other videos that you may not have caught up with. This is Peter Schweitzer talking to Jason Hafetz on Fox News about George Soros. There you go, that name again, and RICO. Fascinating. Let's take a look at part of that interview now.
Hour on just this. It's so infuriating. But I want to transition to George Soros. There are some serious allegations. They're only allegations. But there's some thought that maybe RICO charges should be brought with some of the organizations tied to George Soros. Tell us about that.
Yeah, of course, I'm not a lawyer, but I've spent a lot of time studying this. RICO is a statute, was passed in 1970 to target organized crime and individuals who were financing and supporting criminal activity, because what was happening is they were arresting the guy on the street, but the guys that were behind it, that were organizing it and financing it, weren't getting arrested. So RICO was passed. It's been used in the past against the Aryan nations. It's been used against white supremacists in Mississippi. The National Organization of Women tried unsuccessfully to use it against pro-life groups. And what it comes down to is this. George Soros on the left, Elon Musk on the right, completely have the right to finance political activities. The question becomes, if you are funding organizations that are engaging in criminal conduct, violent criminal conduct. Think, for example, of the Los Angeles riots, some of the groups behind that. Think about the attacks on Tesla that have taken place. There was an attack down in Georgia in 2023 where they were throwing fire bombs and attacking cops at a place called Cop City. The organizations behind that were funded by funding networks like the Tides Foundation and the Open Society Foundation, which George Soros, of course, funds. So the question is, if they are funding organizations that are known to engage in criminal, violent conduct, could they be charged under RICO? And I think there is a precedent there, and I think it's something that ought to be looked at by prosecutors. Because, again, we want to have a very strong conversation in America about the future of our country. We do not want wealthy individuals funding violent protesters that are tearing down our cities and that are harming law enforcement officers.
Yeah, look, it's about the most American thing you can do to protest your government, right? That's the First Amendment right. But when it tips over into violence, when you have pallets of bricks showing up, that is potentially something that is, something that leads to violence.
Now I'm going to play for you a clip coming out of the United Kingdom where there is support for Donald Trump. It seems that perhaps in the UK, people have had enough of being admonished, arrested, taken down for their thoughts about what is going on, about the types of crimes that are being committed against English people by what we're now seeing as you're either denying it or you're acknowledging it. But the crimes of sexual assaults against UK natives, people that live there, who were born there, by those that are immigrating, has reached a point now that people have had enough. But this clip is support for Donald Trump. Have a look.
And we want you to succeed. Forget about the people in London. Forget about the establishment. Forget about the detractors in the fake news media. The real people out there in the United Kingdom. We love you, Mr. President.
Now we'll head over to France, where there is more rallies going on. This one, they are out for Macron. And in some more sad scenes we're seeing out of Nepal today, we've seen 19 people have been killed in rioting there. The government, once again, involved in censorship, taking down of social media sites. Rioting occurs, 19 people dead.
At least 19 people were killed in protests that turned violent in Nepal's capital Kathmandu on Monday, according to authorities. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at demonstrators who were storming parliament buildings. Organizers of the protests are calling them demonstrations by Gen Z, saying young people are frustrated by government corruption, a lack of economic opportunities, and a recent social media ban. An ambulance and a security personnel building were set on fire while the rioters hurled rocks at police guarding the legislature. Police told Reuters that more than 100 people, including 28 police personnel, were receiving medical treatment for injuries. Another 2 people were killed when protests in the eastern city of Itahari turned violent, police said. The government blocked access to several social media platforms last week. It says the companies failed to register with authorities in a crackdown on misuse, including false social media accounts used to spread hate speech and fake news and commit fraud.
Back to the United States now, and RFK Jr. has addressed concerns of hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children walking into the United States and who have gone missing. Here he is explaining what he is going to do about it. Seems at odds with what we've seen from the former Biden administration.
I want to show this video. This is a little boy who was found in the desert, abandoned by the cartels, who decided they didn't want to care about him anymore, and our Border Patrol found him. Watch.
¿Qué pasó? Es que yo venía con un grupo de personas y me dejaron botar y no sé dónde están. ¿No sabes dónde están? ¿Te dejaron solo? Pues claro, me dejaron botar. ¿Dónde me voy a ir? Allí voy a dejar. Y tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo. ¿Te pueden robar? Miedo. ¿Tienes miedo? Ok. Sí. Ahorita hablamos, ¿ok?
By the way, Secretary, that boy's parents, his father or uncle or whoever, was found eventually in Florida, and they reunited him where no American parent would be reunited with their child if they had left their kid in the hands of cartels to cross over a dangerous desert. But let's put that aside. Your agency is finding these children. What are you discovering?
Yeah. Well, what we've discovered is there was 476,000 unaccompanied children who were lost during the Biden administration. The Biden administration put speed over safety because before coming into office, they had accused the Trump administration, the previous Trump administration, of putting kids in cages. So they wanted to show above all things, that they were getting the kids out of the cages, so they were not doing security checks on the people who came to pick them up, and they were not doing DNA testing, they were not doing fingerprinting, they were not doing income verification, they were not even doing identification. They sent 42 kids to one address. People who claim to be their parents, they were sending kids to parking lot addresses that had, just had a container in it. We've now we've stopped that. We're doing income verification. We're doing DNA testing, fingerprinting on everybody who comes in and says that they're a parent. We are knocking on doors trying to find the kids who are lost. We've knocked on about 82,000 doors. Following leads, we've recovered about 22,000 kids, and we're going to keep doing that for the next 3.5 years and try to find every kid that was lost.
Now, Donald Trump has decided to do something about crime in Chicago, as he has done in Washington, D.C., and we've seen the horrific story of the young Ukrainian woman murdered on public transport by a deranged character, and Donald Trump immediately addressing it. But in Washington, D.C. at the weekend, there were rallies against Donald Trump for attempting to clean out crime. How is this possible? And are people simply just protesting against Trump for the sake? Or is there any merit in the idea of not wanting to clean up crime? Also in Trump news, Trump has posted this very interesting video where he has claimed that all vaccines are poison.
Show them the thimerosal bottle, which we keep in a metal container because we're a little afraid of it. And it's a very fine powder.
This is thimerosal, which is labeled very toxic, has cumulative effects, can cause damage to the kidneys, to the respiratory system, skin, to the nervous system. It specifically warns on here that it can cause reproductive and developmental toxicity, meaning that it can cause things like autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. This is immensely toxic stuff. And this is what's in the vaccine. It's important to realize we're talking about a whole range of products. Vaccines are a big one because, of course, you're directly injecting it. For example, this is tetanus vaccine. This one expires, it's a little outdated now, in 2007. And here's the thimerosal. 1 to 10,000 is a preservative. Perhaps the biggest one in the U.S., at least, that's for exposure to mercury is the influenza vaccine. Influenza vaccine is now recommended for all pregnant women, all infants, all children on a yearly basis. You're supposed to
have last year's influenza? Understand that thimerosal is not added at the end. It's not like, well, that factory next year can make thimerosal free. Thimerosal, you either have to have a thimerosal free factory or you have to not have one. They add thimerosal at each step because the factory is not clean and not sterile. So you either have to have an expensive sterile factory where you don't need thimerosal, or you have to have one that produces thimerosal. It's going to need thimerosal or something the whole time. It needs to be stopped.
This is the influenza vaccine from Adventist Pasteur, their flu zone. Thimerosal, 25 micrograms of mercury per dose.
I'd like to point out that a lot of people didn't know, and I'm one of them. I've given 2,000 RhoGAM shots. I've been in vaccines for 35 years. I didn't know that RhoGAM had thimerosal in it. So I think a lot of the doctors were unaware. They were unaware that even the word thimerosal meant mercury.
And with all the news brewing about Donald Trump and the letter that he apparently wrote to Jeffrey Epstein, we also learned from Speaker Mike Johnson that Donald Trump was an FBI informant when it came to Jeffrey Epstein.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable to him. He and I have spoken about this as recently as 24 hours ago.
So can you change your views on something or someone? Well, of course you can. So it's possible that Trump was a friend of Epstein. We've also heard that he hadn't done anything untoward towards Epstein victims, and then would then turn on Epstein, as we most well know from what we learnt from Mar-a-Lago, when Epstein had hit on the daughter of a staffer, and Trump kicked him out for life at that point. Don't know why it's so difficult to understand, but as long as the eyes are on Epstein through the lens of Donald Trump, it still keeps the eyes on, and that's the most important part. So it's a complicated situation that we have with what we're seeing now in Australia, but there is a genuine line in the sand and a genuine request for the Liberal Party to make a difference from the Labor Party in order to become relevant. And this will be weighed up against the globalist approach versus the nationalist approach, but we're not quite there yet. Well, thanks for watching this edition of Channel 51 News. I look forward to seeing you all on the next show, and there'll be some terrific interviews as well that I'll announce in the coming days for more subjects of newsworthy, detailed, long-form interviews. Can't wait to bring them to you. Thanks for watching. See you all on the next show.
News from around the world as it affects us at Channel 51. The latest interviews, the archives. The world is changing rapidly. Putting it all together. Buy one, get one free. Subscribe at channel51.com.au and get qcitizen.net for free. Daily news, twice weekly interviews, archive of hundreds of major interviews, special events. Thank you for supporting independent media.